I appreciate being on here. I haven't spoken in front of a group of career services people in a while. I used to do it essentially for a living, but always good to be re-engaged. I've been at Techstars for 6 years. We're an early seed stage accelerator. Currently have 50 accelerators around the world. And each accelerator takes 10 companies through a 12-week program, surrounds them with mentors and investors, and spins them out into the world. My role at this organization is, in essence, to build the alumni association around all our founders. To date, we've had about 2,000 companies go through our accelerators. We have about 6,000 founders that are in our network. I also have the broader lens, and I'm in charge of cross-connecting our 11,000 mentors globally. And generally, the needs of our alumni are not too indifferent from the needs of alumni at universities. They're looking for engagement opportunities, but they're certainly, as entrepreneurs, looking for help and support through relational capital with investors, with business development, corporate development connections, and for hiring. And the last piece I'm going to focus on a little bit about how we're approaching hiring entering 2020. But I want to step back a little bit and level set my experiences in career services at universities. I was hired into Michigan State University almost 15 years ago to be the internship and experiential director for the entire university. So 47,000 students. My role was built to create unique opportunities for students. Give you an example of that. One of our alumni was the president of Discovery Studios, worked with him in lieu of a gift to create internship opportunities at Discovery for students who were graduating in our film or production majors. And I use that kind of thought process against Wall Street or jobs in sports, jobs internationally, jobs on Wall Street, tried to approach and enact our alumni to create those experiences. In doing the implementation of that role, I got identified as somebody to replace our outgoing Director of Alumni Career Services, and went into that position in 2008. What was interesting in that position is I was hired in as Director of Alumni Career Services, essentially had no budget, had no staff, and shortly after joining, a little recession happened. It was hugely impactful for specifically Michigan State University. The automotive industry drove off the cliff, almost literally and figuratively. Michigan State University was about an hour drive away from the big three U.S. automotive companies, and 260,000 alumni in the state of Michigan were either directly or tangentially attached to the automotive industry. And overnight, my office went from getting maybe 100 calls a week or emails a week from alumni to thousands. And every one of the calls that I was getting was increasingly more impactful. I'm going to lose my job if you don't help me out. I'm going to lose my home if you don't help me out. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to have to move out of state if you don't help me out. It was a huge emotional weight at that time. And what I was witnessing in that role was a paradigm shift from what was an old approach to navigating the job search process to a new approach of navigating the job search process. Unique for me in that role at that time, I was both a graduate of Michigan State University, as was my wife. We met in class. That's when you can say aw. We got married at the Alumni Chapel on campus. Again, you can say aw. And she was the director of communication for the College of Business. And obviously I was director of alumni career services. So we bled green. We understood the fabric of what it meant to be a Michigan State University Spartan, similar to your university, your alumni, your students. And because of that emotion, I stayed put and tried to help recreate what we could do to support alumni in that time. Now, there were a couple of things that I identified right away, and this goes back into networks, which is one of the things I play into now, and the advent of online personal branding, and I'll support that a little bit deeper in a second. One of the first things I identified is as automotive workers or those people who were tangential to automotive started to get laid off, they had only built careers in that one industry, and they had only built networks in that one industry. And And so we had to reshape how they talked about themselves. We had to reshape how they positioned their unique selling proposition, their skill sets to employers in different industries. And it led to a mainstay of what I talk about, which is build a network before you need it, so it's there when you do. And that's been kind of a guiding light for me, talking about networks and how to support networks long term. And it will continue to be that way, for the rest of my career. What I also realized, though, is as that paradigm shifted, we needed to approach how people found jobs differently. And the front door was becoming really crowded, which is going to happen in 2020 as well. So applying through a website for a job was not going to be the most efficient, effective way to gain access. Leveraging alumni of an institution to support students and young alumni or other alumni to find jobs was the way to go. And so we started to really lean in on generation of online communities. Michigan State University ended up building the largest college or university LinkedIn group in the world at that time. And we positioned cross-connection of alumni and students in that space. We also headhunted for our CEOs, our partners, our general managers, our owners, people who had jobs, to go into that environment with that idea that a Spartan would help a Spartan, and really push that narrative. Very interesting thing happened out of that, because we were cross-connecting people in that environment. They were helping each other in real time, which wasn't tapping into me directly, so it was extending my productivity. And we learned downstream that we could tie that community back into the university for time, talent, and treasure. So we could do student engagement. We could generate internship, experiential job opportunities for students. So it was a huge shift in the approach that we were taking to delivery of career services. At the same time, which is a little bit more difficult today because we're in the midst of a pandemic and we can't actually go and engage with people in external engagement opportunities, we started to generate presentations that we could give to our alumni base about Job Search 2.0, what those changes look like, about effective personal branding, how to utilize LinkedIn to play off affiliations to create opportunities, specifically university affiliation. And in the course of about a year, gave presentations throughout the state of Michigan and the Midwest to about 6,000 alumni, helping retrain their thought process and how they engage in the job and work environment. The interesting thing is specifically in Michigan at that time, the automotive industry was viewed as a legacy employer. And that was really shot to hell during that period. And so we had to, we noticed a shift on how people navigated jobs, especially young alumni and students. They were going into jobs for a shorter period of time and looking at it as almost tour of duties instead of looking at it as a lifelong commitment. And that's only accelerated through today. So that explains some of my experiences in 2008, and I was in that role until 2011. Then I ended up at LinkedIn. And LinkedIn helped me build the second most effective thing for both personal branding and utilizing your online presence as relational currency in the job search. We started to tie longitudinal career data to every member on LinkedIn and then tie that to a university. So the team I was on built the university pages that you see on LinkedIn. They built the alumni tool that you see on LinkedIn that you've probably used for students in the past. And the idea was to make that learning that I had at Michigan State even more apparent to every student, every alumni, every university in the world, so that they could see how they could navigate relationships to get into the companies, the jobs that they wanted to get into. They could see longitudinally, if I graduate with this degree, what careers could I go into? What do have alumni done footsteps in front of us? And then we, as an organization at LinkedIn, we're really trying to focus on strengthening those alumni to alumni, alumni to student, back to institution ties, because we realized it was a primary affiliation that people had in their network that was likely to take a call for somebody who was job seeking, who could ask for advice and potentially get in the back door of the job search process. So starting with something like, my name is John Hill. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University. I see that you work at Google, really interested in learning about your experience there, and using that conversation to get your resume, your LinkedIn profile into their inbox so that they take you down to HR and you become an internal referral for opportunity. So again, trying to help people redefine how to navigate the job search process. What was fascinating about that experience is it codified a second thing that I've talked about through my career, which is build a quality relational network, not a quantity relational network. And what we found is there are 4 primary relationships that you have that are most effective at building a quality relational network that you can use for job search or for opportunities. Number 1 is friends and family. Number 2 is university affiliation. Number 3 is shared work experience. Number 4 is professional development or professional causes. So committees, boards, professional activities that you're engaged in. And if you build networks with those as the inputs, you're going to have quality networks that'll help you get to a second level connection where 85% of the job opportunities through relational networking happen. So fast forward to today and what we're looking at in 2020, and it's another paradigm shift, and it's going to be a drastic paradigm shift, and you're already feeling it. I think every one of you has experienced a student who's had a job offer pulled, students that are trying to navigate internship and experiential opportunities and not having the ability to do that because the environment has changed and you can't physically go to location. And so Techstars as an organization is looking at talking about behavioral shifts that are going to happen in every vertical. But that includes hiring, and that includes what this space is going to look like. We also run a program with Blackstone Charitable Foundation, the Launchpad programs, which represent 27 university entrepreneurial centers across the country. And I saw somebody from UCLA pop on this call, which is one of our schools, Cornell, NYU, USC, University of Texas, Austin. So this is near and dear to our heart on what that shift will look like, because we're working directly with students who happen to be entrepreneurs, but we'll also be trying to navigate jobs and opportunities in the future. So here are a few things that I think are going to change. And I'm going to talk about this for about 5 minutes, and then I'll open it up to questions and go from there. But certainly your social presence has just become that much more important because you can't actually physically engage with people. It limits your opportunity for generating a broader network, which means you need to connect with people online. You need to showcase what your expertise is in that space. You have to be careful about how you curate your personal and professional identity because now it's going to be used as a vetting process even further for employees. They're going to lean into that because they're going to have less chance to see you in person. We think that there's going to be a shift in where employees work. So obviously all of us are staying at home. Some semblance of us are going to go back into the work environment when this clears, but there is going to be a sizable amount of people who won't. Where we think, say, tech companies may lean in is instead of having to congregate in hyper-economic zones like New York or London or San Francisco, they can connect with talent wherever it is. And so smaller cities may see connection to larger companies and organizations, which makes it a little bit more difficult for you to figure out how to connect your students to the opportunities because they're not going to be in a physical location. It's going to be a virtual environment. There's going to be a drastic change in the work environment regardless. Co-working spaces are getting particularly hit hard. But you're going to have a lasting residual effect here. So employers will again lean into more online resources to vet and source talent, which means AI tools are going to become even more to the forefront. So helping your students and alumni understand how to utilize search terms that are relevant, the rhetoric that's relevant to the employers in all of their representation of their personal and professional brands is going to be imperative. Otherwise, they're not going to get through those filters. And because they're not human filters, it's going to be hard to show different dimensions of who you are and what you're about. I think you're going to start to see the even faster attrition of resumes and the CV. So those of you who are doing resume reviews, those of you who are doing CV reviews, the shift will be to an online presence. So LinkedIn, certainly one of the professional identities of record, but it'll be broader than that. And you're going to have to help encompass how the professional world looks at students, looks at young alumni in the job search perspective. So those are some of the, and one last thing, I think that there's going to be an overemphasis in the short term on STEM. And those jobs actually, you will see a need for students. We're taking a short-term hit on that, but you're going to see people doubling down on STEM majors to pull in, partly because they can get them cheaper if they're relocated in smaller cities, and they're assets that are going to be collected right now as much as possible, which is not the way to look at students, but it's certainly how the employers are looking at them. The job market has definitely shifted from the employee to the employer, and that will likely not change globally for the near term. And so that means that doing business development, corporate development, outreach from a career services perspective is going to be important, because those are the relationships that you can control. So having outreach is going to be vastly more important than having in-school office hours. So another way to look at how things have shifted and changed. And then it's imperative for career services to start to virtualize as much of the engagement that they've done in the past. So anytime that you've done something where you've taken an employer into the classroom, where you've done virtual career fairs or physical career fairs, where you've done interviews, where you've brought in experts to facilitate small forum experiences for students, you need to replicate that in a virtual environment, and that shift will likely be more permanent than less. So having that virtual acuity is going to be really important for you long term. So I don't know if I talked about this, but while I was at LinkedIn, I spoke at 110 conferences in 20 countries. So I definitely made the rounds during that time period. And to date, I think I've spoken at 187 universities. So I've had a pretty heavy experience on the university side, and probably on a lot of your campuses, on the people who are on this call. So business development is definitely not necessarily a new word for career services, but maybe a new application across the board. Generally, that was compartmentalized. And so one person, two people would take on employer relations, and everybody else would be practitioners in career services. There's going to have to be a shift in the skill sets at institutions to all have some level of employer development and engagement. And the beautiful thing is, Ken, if you don't have those relationships built already, you have alumni that are in some of the companies and industries that you're going to be likely looking to break into. So there's actually a dovetail with your alumni association to do this, is alumni outreach and engagement to connect those people back to the institution. So in essence, it's a little bit of circling the wagons again. And then those lessons learned from connecting with those alumni that are employers by market, you can apply to other people who are not alumni. So you can start to broaden out the lens a bit. I can tell you what we've done as an organization, and this is more from an alumni perspective, but it certainly hits into talent. Right now, we've inventoried all of our companies that are hiring. We've inventoried all of our companies that have let people go, and we're trying to connect those people who have been let go into those jobs that are available in some of our companies that are actually performing really well during this time. And we actually identified 200 companies in the TechStars portfolio out of those 2,000 companies that have direct solves for COVID-19, whether it's for vulnerable audiences or remote education or remote work or telemedicine, you name it. And so those companies are actually scaling. And so we can match talent real time, but you have to do the audit and the inventory to see that. And I don't know how many universities are actually auditing where their students are, other than doing like the historic career placement work. Because that really should go to the side right now, and it should be about being human. We've also individually reached out to all 6,000 of our founders, or are in the process of doing that, trying to ascertain both their emotional needs and then what their needs are for us through network. and then actualizing our organization to support those needs. So real time redeveloping how we support through product and service our alumni constituency. And there's a way you can do that through career services. So if you put your ear to the ground, you'll hear exactly what's happening and then work back and re-engineer that to create the solves and solutions that you need. So I'll leave it at that. And I'm happy to, by the way, circle back with anybody one-on-one if you want to go deeper on this. So as you can imagine, there's a little bit of Zoom fatigue or, in this instance, Hangout fatigue. I've actually been on 5 different web sharing platforms in the last 24 hours. And so, you've got to become adept to navigating each one of these areas. But like the real challenge is one, representing your company effectively in that space as an employer to students, and then also like showcasing authenticity through a virtual environment, which is really difficult because it's not natural to talk to a computer all day. But if you think about the computer as human beings, if you think about those people as just in the room with you, you can reframe that to be, bring your guard down instead of worrying about how you're being represented, worrying about how you connect with the people. And it's the same kind of thought process I take into public speaking. I want to connect with the audience, and I want to make sure that the information I'm supplying is the right information. And that's always a challenge for any of us. So I think the best thing you can do is be authentic in the conversations that you're having.